Lowe's knows big savings make a big difference, especially when you're shopping for appliances. Hurry in to get up to 30% off select major appliances. Plus, My Lowe's Rewards members get free delivery, free haul away, free installation and parts on purchases of $2,500 or more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 7/30. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. Price, delivery time, and vehicle availability may vary based on order size and location. Exclusions apply. See Lowe's.com/delivery for more details.
Hungry after the game? Hit up Tamalitos Restaurant, home of San Antonio's best weekly specials and legendary Taco Tuesdays. Fresh, loaded, and just $1. Tamalitos. Local flavor, big taste. 2042 South Callahan Road, right across Missions Baseball Stadium.
San Antonio Sports Star, live from Dallas Cowboys training camp, is brought to you by AA Best Bail Bonds and sponsored in part by Southern Recipe Pork Rinds, Jim Beam, and AARP. On Texas home of the Dallas Cowboys, 94.1 San Antonio Sports Star.
What a day it's been here at Dallas Cowboys training camp. AA Best Bail Bonds. We are live from Oxnard, California. And I tell you what, it has been a great day. Mickey Spagnola joining us. We had Nate Newton. We had Stephen Jones. And just a fabulous day here in Oxnard.
And if you missed Nate was incredible on a lot of topics. Go either watch the video on YouTube. It's on our socials, a link there. Listen to it at sasportstar.com. It's already in the audio vault. Powered by AA Best Bail Bonds. Stephen Jones will be there shortly, and Mickey Spagnola with some great insight on Tyler Guyton, who had just I would say a brutal injury, but the best of news. Let's talk about it with Dr. Christopher Tucker joining us now on the Buyers Barricades guest line for our injury update, powered by the Sports Institute at TSAOG Orthopedics and Spine, online at tsaog.com. Doc, we were talking to Stephen Jones about an hour ago, and he said for about 3 hours they were thinking torn ACL surgery out for the season. And so the relief when you find out it's a broken bone in the knee, 4 to 6 weeks. So what do you think is actually going on inside the knee of one Tyler Guyton?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for having me on, guys. I shared everybody's surprise and relief when I heard the news too. I was looking into it, and this definition of a broken bone can be a pretty big spectrum. What I found interesting is that they only really identified it on the MRI, which is, a finer tooth comb than an X-ray. So when we think of a broken bone, we think of, things snapping in half and being pretty severe. When it's a fracture or a broken bone that you're identifying in an MRI, I think that's reassuring news that it's something less serious, potentially, what you might consider a hairline fracture or even an injury to the bone marrow itself, which can be bruised much like any other part of the body and does take time to heal, but certainly not as severe as a complete fracture or even an ACL tear like was suspected initially.
Doc, that's interesting because even Stephen Jones said, the Cowboys doctor, he was the one that said, I'm afraid we fear this could be the ACL. And then the MRI showed that. What would make you think perhaps that it was the ACL?
Yeah, so one of the biggest suspicion, one of the things that raises suspicion the most for us as, sports medicine doctors is the mechanism of injury. How are these athletes injured? And commonly the ACL injury can be a non-contact twisting injury, planting and changing direction, a rotational injury to the knee, or a hyperextension. And so when you see that sort of mechanism and somebody go down and they have a difficulty getting up afterwards, ACL is usually the first, second, and third suspicion before you move on to other, possibilities. So I think that was probably what raised their suspicion initially, was just how he was injured. And then you've got to kind of rule that out before you look at anything else.
Doc, speaking of offensive line injuries, one that I'm curious to get your opinion on is offensive guard Rob Jones. In practice, probably in all reports, maybe early in practice, broke a bone in his neck, continued to play and finish the practice, and is like, I don't know, man, my neck kind of hurts. But besides, I don't know, your vertebrae, what could he have actually broken in his neck? And how lucky is he that it's a 4 to 6 week injury and he can actually walk and feel his arms and legs?
Yeah, sure. I share everybody's sentiment that, relief and gratitude that it wasn't more severe. I agree. Very scary injury to hear about. And I also shared your interest in the fact that, the reports were that it happened earlier in the practice and he was able to actually finish the day. That, again, lowers my barometer for concern. And anybody that has a projected return, this season or, even, considering returning to football at all after a neck injury, leads me to believe it technically is probably a fracture of a bone, but one of the structural bones of the neck that has more to do with muscular attachments and movements rather than protection of the spinal cord. And, that's what we obviously get more concerned about when we hear about neck injuries, is injury to the main spinal cord or nerves that come off of that. And so you can have kind of two big categories of spine injuries, one that's structurally unstable or compromising, risk to the nerve, and then other, non-structural, what we call stable injuries. And there are lots of little bony projections that come off the spine that connect muscles and ligaments. And although, painful and do require recovery, they don't run the risk of any sort of nerve injury.
Well, I tell you what, just scary when you're talking about the neck, though, anytime, and a broken bone especially. I've got to ask you about another Cowboy who's hurt, cornerback Kalen Carson. You said that he hyperextended his knee, Doc. What exactly does that mean, and what does that do to the knee?
Yeah, I mean, hyperextension is, again, like I mentioned earlier in our conversation, a risk for an ACL tear. So, when somebody hyperextends their knee or the knee bends backwards, so to speak, you've got to worry that they tear a major ligament. Now, if he hasn't, which obviously he hasn't, then you're talking about a hyperextension basically being a knee sprain. And so there's lots of things you can injure in a hyperextension. You can strain the back of the calf, the calf muscle. You can strain the actual joint, lining or the capsule or the ligaments themselves. But if you don't tear something structurally, it's usually kind of in the category of, joint strain or muscle sprain, all of which just require some rehab, some time and rest, some treatments, downtime, and then the 4 to 6 week time frame for recovery. That's a pretty reasonable prognosis. Again, the barometer can move left or right on this, so he could rehab quicker and bounce back, or it could end up being something a little bit deeper and take a hair longer. But, I think that's a fairly conservative estimate right out the gate.
Aren't you glad we're in football season? We got real manly injuries to talk about, because otherwise we'd be discussing for 5 minutes that Lance McCullers went on the injured list because of a blister. Now, granted, it's on his right hand. It's on his finger on his right hand. And, he is a pitcher, but come on, a blister?
Yeah, no comment on that. I'm just glad to talk about something, more up my alley with sports medicine injuries.
There you go. Dr. Christopher Tucker, always appreciate the time and the knowledge. We'll catch up with you soon. That's the Injury Update powered by the Sports Institute at TSAOG Orthopedics and Spine, online at TSAOG.com. Dr. Tucker and all our guests on the Buyers Barricades guest line, where they provide traffic control, rental, and sales for San Antonio and beyond, online at buyersbarricades.com.
Well, unfortunately, this broadcast got to come to an end. But fortunately, we'll be back tomorrow. They will practice again tomorrow. And we just got some news. Perhaps running back Miles Sanders will join us here on the Blitz tomorrow afternoon.
Miles Sanders tomorrow on the Blitz. And you never know who's going to end up on the show, because, saw Nate Newton watching film. Like, Nate, come on.
Yeah,
you never know. And it's steak night at the Beach House tonight, so I'll imagine there'll be some pretty good stories.
Absolutely, there will be. Our AA Best Bail Bonds Dallas Cowboys training camp coverage continues tomorrow live from Oxnard, California. Now, don't forget, coming up next, extra innings with Pledger. Stay tuned for that, and then tune in early tomorrow morning for the Morning Huddle with AJ and Rob. They'll get into some hijinks as well. Appreciate you guys joining us here on this Tuesday afternoon. We will see you tomorrow.
AA Best Bail Bonds coverage of Cowboys training camp live from Oxnard, California.